Hello, everybody. This is Scott Abels. I'm the president and co-founder of Prepjet, and this is my weekly podcast where I want to answer questions that have been submitted to us, as well as talk a little bit with you about certain key elements that you might want to consider incorporating in your studies. The first thing I want to address, which I think last week we had a question about this and wasn't able to get to it. I think that there are several types of charts or documents that you can create to assist you in learning, not memorizing, learning content. One of the first things I did when we launched Prepjet back in 2017, and I should say thank you to oh my goodness, I can't tell you, there must have been 400 or 500 people who signed up with us in September. We currently have around 1,400 applicants studying with us. So I want to thank those who joined Prepjet, subscribed to Prepjet to pass their exam with us. We appreciate your trust. The brain chart. I've talked about this brain chart numerous times because I believe the brain chart is sort of like what Prepjet is. When I met with Dr. Markovitz years ago with the idea of leaving the two large brands that I had been running for decades for the EPPP and forming Prepjet, I think the brain chart is actually very much what Prepjet's all about, synthesizing and creating an efficient way for you to learn content, to master content. Now, as you know, one of the areas in the candidate handbook that's emphasized on the exam is the biological basis of behavior. This incorporates elements of physio, lifespan as it relates to genetic developmental issues, and psychopathology. So I had this idea, and many applicants have been employing this idea because I think it makes for a better way to learn. So imagine you have an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, okay? This 8.5 sheet of 11, you're going to have 5 columns. So you have 5 columns. So let's pretend you're a Prepjet subscriber or you're using another brand. When we are being instructed about the amygdala or the prefrontal cortex or any area of the brain, we will list those areas of the brain in column A. So we might have basal ganglia, amygdala, prefrontal cortex, etc. We list all these areas of the brain in column A. Now in column B, this is where we learn about the functions. On the exam, you could be asked, of course, about sleep and memory, but also cognition and emotion. Sleep, memory, cognition, emotion. Those are the 4 functions I want you to know about. And if that area of the brain is related to sleep, then you'll write the word sleep next to that area of the brain. So imagine you have all these areas of the brain in column A. Column B, the boxes may be blank, or the word sleep might be in a box next to one area. Maybe memory will be in a box next to another area. So they're just columns and boxes. It's really simple. So we have the brain area, we have functions, and then we have column C, which are the disorders: Klinefelter, Tourette's, Turner, Rett syndrome, Alzheimer's, autism. The list goes on, but we only list those disorders. We only list those functions, and we only list those brain areas that Diane makes mention of. Now, if you're not a Prepjet subscriber, I suppose you should focus only on the areas that are mentioned in your materials. Now, I happen to know the materials for the 2 bigger brands that were around when I started in this business 30 plus years ago. And, you know, everyone's going to have to talk to you about the amygdala, for instance, or the basal ganglia. And the basal ganglia, for instance, is related to several disorders. So I might list it several times because in the Prepjet program, we break it down. So it's more simplified. You're not going to have to go through volumes of study material just to find what brain areas do I have to know for the EPPP. So we're only going to cover brain areas that we know you could be asked about. So this is not Psych 101. We're only teaching to the test. And I want you to keep that in mind. So column A, we have the areas of the brain that Diane lists in physio, for instance. We also list one of the 4 functions if it's applicable. We don't list functions unless Diane, in our materials at least, makes mention that this area of the brain is related to sleep. This area of the brain is related to memory. This area of the brain is also related to memory, maybe. My point is this: stick to what's in the material. Don't go to WebMD. Don't Google it. You're wasting your time. They're not set up to prepare you for the EPPP. That's what we do. So column A, brain area. Column B, function. Column C, the disorder. Now, a little asterisk. One of the disorders that I know is in one of the revisions we just did, and I've been talking about it since May, child maltreatment, for instance. You need to know about child maltreatment. You also need to know that the age of onset is birth to age 3. Now, if I know the age of onset, whether it's for this disorder or that disorder, I'm going to list it underneath the disorder in column C. So column C is where I list all the disorders. But I have been asking my applicants, the ones I work with, to make sure that they put the age of onset only if Diane mentions it. I qualify that all the time. Don't put stuff in there unless we specifically address it, because otherwise you're just wasting your time. So column C is the disorder. Column D is D for drug. The drugs that are used to treat the disorder that is related to that area of the brain that's in column A. So A, B, C, and D all flow together. Drug, disorder, function, brain area. And then column E, side effects. But don't list a side effect again unless Diane makes mention of it. After 40 years of researching all the content that you could be asked about on the EPPP, and given the large volume of revisions we just recently did, and there'll be more revisions in the month of October, I can tell you we know what they're going to ask you about. The words could be different. But if you want to master the biological base of behavior, which are elements of physio, psychopathology, and lifespan, you need to create your own brain chart. And use the chat feature if you have any questions for me while I'm online today, and I will answer them. So again, the brain chart is your brain chart. All the areas that Diane mentions go in column A, brain areas in column A, functions in B, disorder with age of onset, because it'll help you, because you will be asked. We have a new quiz question on this now, on child maltreatment. And I know people have read it, but they don't seem to remember it. And age of onset is important. And then, of course, column D is the drug. And you'll say, Scott, do I need to know the brand or the generic name? You use the name that we mention. Sometimes it's the brand name. Sometimes it's the generic name. It really depends. Now, side effects do not always get listed because she doesn't always need to go into them because they don't always ask about them in some cases. But given the large number of questions in the test bank, which are, twice a year, they swap them out, but then you're just going to see the questions. If you're a retake, for instance, and it's, say, September of 2021, the questions you'll see in, say, February of 20 might be the same questions that people were seeing a year previous. And then they swap them out every 6 to 8 months or so. As far as the experimental questions, I want to remind you that there are 50 questions that are unscored. 50 questions that are unscored. Now, my Prepjet applicants, they know because we have test 6, which are only experimental questions. That's why test 6 is not taken like a regular test. Test 6 should be taken maybe 15 questions a day. And you might as well just answer D because you don't really care. You just want to know what's the answer and then what is the explanation. It's contrary to everything we do with tests 1 through 5. Remember, the tests 1 through 4 for us are the core exams. And what's remarkable is that in all these years, we haven't needed to change the questions because the summaries are what give birth to the questions. We are teaching content. So the crazy people that want to sign up for 2 weeks just to take tests are better off staying where they are. It's not to be rude. I'm saving them money because they have what I want to talk to you about. For instance, there is a brand that might send clients to us. Why? Because that client has taken all of their exams and failed the EPPP 5, 6 times, but they've memorized these answers. It's called practice effect. Some of you may actually have it. We have candidates that have it. We have candidates that I don't work with that are just constantly taking tests. Nobody seems to want to learn, and you will not learn anything by taking a test. A test gives us an idea of using the drop-down menus. For instance, if I say that my score is 67% in clinical, well, what is it that I'm missing in clinical? That's why we created the drop-down menus. Is it cross-cultural issues? Is it brief or perhaps humanistic or psychodynamic therapies? Is it family therapies? Is it CBT? Whatever it is, we break it down, and that is what you want to be aware of, which leads me to why I want to encourage applicants. I posted about this in our Facebook group today. There are too many people just taking tests. I remember as far back as 1990, 1989, people would call our office. How many questions do you have and how much do they cost? And I just thought, this is insanity because all they want to do is take tests. Why? To find out that you don't know anything? Do you really think a mock exam, a mock exam, or even the EPPP is a true indicator of your strengths, your knowledge, your skills? Of course it's not. It's just a test. But set aside the real exam for a minute. When I have an applicant recently who scored a 475 and a 470 3 months previous, and I see that they took our exams multiple times within weeks of each other. Of course, their scores are in the 80s and 90s, but if I reword those questions, they're not going to be able to answer them. And that person should not take the test because they have practice effect and they don't know enough. They know one answer to one question, and there's no way in hell they're going to remember all of that. So they need to read the summaries. So practice effect is something that I want you to overcome. One other thing I want to help you with, and this part is just for the Prepjet people. As you know, the drop-down menus for, say, clinical, physio, lifespan, I emphasize this a lot, and psychopathology. And today is a Friday. I have a workshop this coming Sunday at 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern. And if you write support@prepjet.net, you might be able to, there might be some room you can come to it. It's a 90-minute workshop, and I will answer questions. But I'm going to be addressing primarily a lot of the revisions to clinical, physio, psychopathology, lifespan, and org psych that we recently put in our materials. But I think the thing I want to point out is I want you to get 4 sheets of paper because you see, for clinical, psychopathology, physio, lifespan, there will be patterns in terms of your errors. There will be patterns in terms of your correct answers. So when I work with applicants and I talk to them and they say, I got a 57 in clinical. And I think that, well, that's too low. We want to be at 70. So let's take a look at your subdomain scores. And maybe there's subdomain scores on cross-cultural issues, identity development models, CBT are all 0 or 33. That's a concern. It becomes a bigger concern after they've read clinical and after they've taken another test, and those scores are pretty much flat. They don't really change much. So clearly, in terms of cross-cultural issues, CBT or whatever, it didn't stick. Do they need to read all the summaries again? No. Only the ones where maybe out of 4 exams on 3, they're scoring 0 to say 60%. But if they're over 70%, don't worry. You got to get in most states 123, a couple of states 127 to pass. You need a C to pass in most states. I'm in California. That's where all of us are here in California, where we have a huge failure rate, and they only need to get a C. 123 correct answers out of 175 scored items. So what I want you to remember to do is as you take these tests, so you have 1 sheet of paper for clinical, 1 sheet of paper for physio, 1 sheet of paper for psychopathology, and 1 sheet of paper for lifespan. And you make 4 columns for tests 1, 2, 3, 4. And then as you take tests, in between reading, maybe physio, lifespan, take a test, then you'll do clinical psychopathology, take a test, ethics, org, you take a test. But my point is this: what matters isn't the 65%. That light's moving. That 65% score isn't important. What's important are the subdomain scores. And that's what I want you to look at. So you're going to track your subdomain scores. So maybe on one exam, my cross-cultural score is 0. But now I've read it. Now I'm scoring maybe 50. And maybe because of the way the questions were worded, I still missed 2 out of 4. On the next test, maybe I got a 70% or 74%. My point is this: if I am below 66% on 3 out of 4 exams, I'm going to go reread that summary, but I'm not going to reread all the other ones. Other brands are going to have you read a lot of stuff. We don't do that. Just like we don't want to shove you through the test world. Taking tests, again, it's stupid. Until you read and master content, there's no point in just taking test after test because you're only fooling yourself. Now, my colleague Ethan is here, and he has some questions that were submitted. I don't see any questions in the chat box, so if you have the questions from Facebook, I'd appreciate it.
Ellen asks, how do I prioritize what to study next?
That would depend. Ellen should focus on first the big 6, which is clinical, psychopathology, ethics, physio, lifespan, and org. Now, those 6 domains are the most heavily weighted domains of the 11. Now, that's not to say that learning and memory isn't important, or psych assessment or stats. It's just that they're not worth many points. No one fails the EPPP because of stats. Okay? You can add stats, psych assessment, and social, add them together. You haven't even come close to half of the clinical questions. And clinical is the #1 killer of scores. So you want to do clinical and then psychopathology. You probably should take a test first to determine your baselines, Ellen. Then I will, with everybody, it's always clinical first and psychopathology. Then you would take another test. And with us, it would be test 1, because test 4 is based on the newer research. Test 1 is the older research that appears on the exam, in our opinion. Then we'll do physio and lifespan. But before I open physio, I've now taken 2 exams. I'm going to look at the drop-down menus that I created, those charts for physio, to look and see where did I score on these 2 exams, maybe 4 and 1. Where did I score low? in brain areas, for instance, or prefrontal cortex. What was my score? Because if I see a lot of zeros, 33s, 50s in my subdomains on the 2 tests I've just taken, I'm going to make sure before I read physio, I make some notes to remind me to drill down into those elements where I was below 66%. So we do physio lifespan, then we might do test number 3, which I think is a bit more difficult than 1 compared when I look at everyone's scores. Then I'll probably do ethics and org, and then I'll take test number 2. And to me, that's the perfect world. And then I might go back and retake 4, which I took at the very beginning of my process, and I should see that my baseline scores went up compared to what they were when I first started. And remember, you're constantly being exposed to content and in the rationales for the answers to the questions. So every single time you take a test, you read that rationale and ask yourself, does Diane's answer make sense? Did I misread the question? Is it one of those reverse questions asking me what is not a proper diagnosis? What is not the right drug? What is not? Or which of the following is not a symptom of schizophrenia? It's very simple the way I'm describing it, but there's a lot of reverse questions on the exam. So that's the ideal order to study. If I'm a retake, I'm going to probably incorporate learning and memory, psych assessment, and social somewhere in the mix, because there are elements of of learning and memory in psych assessment and social that can help you bolster your scores in, say, physio or psychopathology. But understand this, even with half your brain missing, you're probably going to get half of the psych assessment correct. You already have knowledge. You already are educated. You know some of this stuff organically. So just keep that in mind. Next.
Ramona would like to know how she can find a study group.
Well, in our Facebook group, I know that people work with each other. I think small study groups, actually, it's interesting because we're about to launch workshops for the first time. You know, we wanted to do this, but we wanted to do it right. And I have 2 former clients, Jill and Joyce, both used Prepjet, both failed and passed by one or 2 questions each, and then retook it and passed. They worked with me, and they've been actually helping people on their own time. And starting in November, we're going to be running workshops of 25 people per group. Now, I'm going to be honest, having sat in on some of the study groups that I know where I've been invited to talk to them, I think you need to be very careful about study groups. Sometimes people contribute very little, and they sort of leech on to everybody else's knowledge and notes and expect them to teach them. Now, what I prefer, and I'm not sure who asked this question, but this applies to everybody. You should find one person. Maybe their strength is physio and yours is clinical. Maybe their strength is ethics and yours isn't. But you know a lot about clinical. Find a study buddy that you can work with that's using the same material. This is how Jill and Joyce met each other, through our Facebook group. And I know hundreds of people in our Facebook group, and we have over 1,800 people in my group on Facebook. I know that they private message each other, but I would tell you of a couple of things. And I say this with all due respect, don't pair up with someone that has the same problems you have, because you won't learn anything. You'll just, woe is me it together, but you're not going to learn from each other. Remember, when I was in law school, maybe my notes, I created my notes for final exams on con law. Someone else did torts. We had a group of 5. I think small groups are far more effective than these groups of 10, 11 people. And I also think meeting more than once a week is dumb. You work, you have a family, You cannot do this every single day. You can study for 30 minutes on a work day, no more. You can study in 45-minute segments on days off with 15-minute breaks as if you're in school, which is what my people do. But I would use caution and make sure you don't pair up with someone who's going to hold you back. You want to partner with someone who's going to contribute just as much as you will. And remember, personality is also very important. So find someone that you would probably want to welcome into your home, even though they might be in another state.
Wanda wants to know, what do coaching sessions offer?
Primarily structure. When I work with applicants, I'm not teaching psychology. I wouldn't pretend to. The coaching sessions are for the people that require structure and accountability. I see no point, though, in meeting with someone if they haven't done their homework. I'm not interested in talking to people unless they do their homework, because I've got always a wait list for coaching calls. And my people usually do very, very well, but I hold them accountable. They hold me accountable. I show up, they have to show up. You can email me till you're blue in the face, but I want you to have done your homework. So if I assign you to do test 3 on a Saturday and we're meeting on Monday and you just can't do it, you should write me Sunday, because I have 5 people that'll take your slot. And then I'll find a spot for you maybe later in that week. It's about creating a plan that is tailored to your needs, because none of you are the same. We're all different. I have clients who work 60 hours a week. I have clients that have just lost their job. I have clients with ADHD who suffer from major depressive disorder. I have clients that are single mothers with 3 kids and they're trying to homeschool. During COVID, I have worked with all kinds of people. I know about their husbands, wives, their divorce. I know about what time they pick up their kids. I know what they volunteer for. I get to know them very well, and I address their needs, but we keep in mind we're going to take this test. So the coaching sessions vary from person to person. It's really about, I've gotten to know some of the neatest, greatest people who I'm sure are now doing great things. And they were always going to be great therapists. They just couldn't pass the stupid multiple choice exam. Half the trick isn't lack of knowledge. It's how to take a test. If you're in the Prepjet program, watch my videos like on how to read a multiple choice exam, how to get started. If you're a retake, there's one which a terrible name, Getting Back in the Saddle Again. I got that from Gene Autry or something. But the coaching sessions are always going to be tied to completing homework. So when I see people booking all these appointments, I don't think they have a clue that they better have read 2 domains and taken a test before that next assignment, before that next phone call. Because what are we going to talk about? The weather? Their anxiety? Are we just going to feel sorry for each other? There's no reason to. You can change this failure rate, but it starts here inside. Each month, I'm doing a rebuilding self-confidence workshop that's open to the public. And I can tell you, we had 75 people in the September workshop, and I have read their stories. And some of these people have failed 10 times, 12 times. They've used brands that I didn't even know existed because they aren't any good. Or they've used big brands that haven't updated their material in 5 years. Either way, they all have a story and they need to be heard. And so when I have a coaching session, yesterday, for instance, I was talking to someone and she kept referring to a green book. And I said, what the hell is this green book? Why are you using another brand and my brand and asking my advice on what to focus on? So I won't waste my time talking to somebody if they're not just focusing on Prepjet. I can't comment about the other brands. I don't want to get sued. But the fact is, you need to know that when you work with me, it's going to be different for every person because you're different. We're all different. Yes.
Just 1 minute till 30.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. Well, the next question was from Mabel. Do you know?
There's actually someone named Mabel.
Yes.
That's sweet. What happened to names like Ethel and Opal and the names I grew up with, Ruby? They used to name women after semi-precious and precious stones. It's cute. At least I was around at that era. Go ahead.
For the next question is by Mabel. How do I know when I'm ready to pass my exam?
When your gut tells you so and you're scoring over 70% on exams 1 through 4, and you know in your heart of hearts you're as ready as you'll ever be. And when you believe in your heart and you know in your mind, I have learned, I am ready, I know this stuff, and I have seen my scores go up, and I can talk till I'm blue in the face about the various stages of structural family therapy and why it's different than strategic family therapy. I believe it is an emotional decision. Mabel and everyone, you'll know you're ready, but if you've taken test 3 5 times, please don't use that as your excuse to sit for the exam. Use this. I have read clinical. I am scoring very well in almost every subdomain. I've read physio. I am scoring over 70%. Now that I have read everything and I've seen all the questions, I am super confident. And let me tell you something. If you're scoring 70% or better on an exam that has 225 scored items, see, the real EPPP has 175 scored items with 50 unscored, right? Well, in tests 1, 2, 3, and 4, all of the items in our book are scored. So even if you got a 68%, numerically, you're in the 150s, you passed. So if you could do that on tests 1, 2, 3, and 4, and know you have not memorized answers, then you need to go sit and take the test. And I would tell you this, when people say, Scott, when do you think I should pick my test date? And I always tell them, when you're done with physio and lifespan and clinical and psychopathology, and you've taken 2 exams, that's probably when you should pick a date. But remember, your scores may not yet be where they need to be, but you got to have a deadline to put a little bit of the squeeze on you. People don't do well under a lot of pressure, but they can do well with a little bit of pressure. And I want people to pass with confidence. Confidence doesn't come just from test scores, though. And the other people out there that sell this stuff, well, in order for our pass guarantee, you must get 80% on exams 1 through 4 to 7. I mean, this is garbage. I'm the one that created the pass guarantee. I did that in the 90s. And the fact that others mimicked what I created is their thing. I don't know how you can guarantee anything. Can you guarantee that I'm going to have sessions with you and I'm not going to commit suicide? Any more than I can guarantee how you're going to behave when you see 12 questions you've never seen before, or the lady I talked to the other day who missed by 1 question changed 7 answers. I have been preaching, do not change your answers. Do not assume information in question 43 is somehow related to question 187 when they both deal with Vygotsky. Do not change answers because you're wrong. Your gut, your initial answer, that was the right answer. I have time for one more, Ethan. I don't think this chat thing is working or no one is asking me any questions.
The last question is by Cheryl. She wants to know how to manage her time on the real EPPP as opposed to the practice exam.
This is something I tell everybody to do. When I go to the EPPP, now this is really the truth too, because even the best prepared people, I'm telling you, since many of you are retakes, you pull in that parking lot, your blood pressure is going to go up. The fear of the past is going to come up. And you can't let that happen. Now, you're a trained therapist. The other day I read a letter from a lady in a state I will not mention, and her board made her and her supervisor come in to meet with them before they would give her approval to retake the exam. The applicant admitted to the board members in her state that her anxiety got the best of her during the test. And this idiot board member who should be beaten and thrown out on the street said, well, how can you possibly help other people if you suffer from anxiety? Now, of course, this is someone appointed by an idiot governor. My point is, dentists get cavities. I've been saying this for years. Therapists have anxiety. You've got to leave that outside. You know more than you think. You're talented. You went to school. You went to an accredited university. You might have a master's degree only. Great. This exam is upper division undergraduate master's content. PsyD, that's fine. PhD, that's fine. All of you, if you use the program properly and you go and take that exam, you sit in that chair. And no matter what the first question is, you read the last two sentences first, as long as it's short. But if it's a long question, I say skip it, flag it, answer it later, ignore it. My method has always been answer the questions you recognize right away, but you recognize them from the last two sentences next to the question mark. This is contrarian to everything we've been. We don't read from the top down. We read the last two sentences. I know what they're asking me. I know the domain and maybe the subdomain. Now I'm going to read the question. And every 25 questions I answer, as soon as I'm done with number 25, whether I'm skipping questions and answering just the short ones and skipping the long ones, and I might never answer any of the stat questions. I may just ignore them. Forget it. I don't care. I'm answering the short ones first. I'm answering by reading the last two sentences first. Then I read the entire question. I go with the right answer. There's three wrong answers, three answers that under no condition could ever be right. Just this past weekend, one applicant just couldn't get it through their head. And then they finally saw it. Hallelujah. The other three would never have been correct. There is no such thing as I was torn between two answers. No. You need to reread the question and then look at the nuances in the wording of the question. Look at the nuances in the wording of the answer, because there's a reason why A, C, and D are wrong under all conditions. Given the question, they're wrong. So it's almost like better versus best. It's the best of the four. And I'm going to pick it. And then, you know what? I move on. Because there's people who linger over a question for 7 minutes. That's crazy. Don't do that to yourself. But I do one thing. Every 25 questions, I stop, I close my eyes, or I look at the floor. I can't get out of my chair, but I can stretch. I can move my neck around. I can go to the restroom. I can go get water. But the clock keeps ticking. But 4 hours and 50 minutes is a very long time, because some questions you're going to answer very quickly, others not so quickly. They need to be read carefully. And then remember this. Words like least likely, unlikely, not, always. Words that are absolute should trigger you to say, warning, read this one carefully. Almost always can throw people. Always. So to close, your ability to read, to flag questions, to feel confident reading the question before you even look at the answer choices is going to save you from a world of hurt. I talk to people every day. Today, I had someone who did not pass, and I had 3 people that did pass. Tomorrow, I have 17 people. I have 16 people testing Saturday. I have 11 or 12 on Monday. Every day, I talk to people who are preparing, and I talk to people who just passed. They share their whole story with me. Most of them are great. They passed. You can pass too. But yes, there is a lot of work. And let me close by reminding you, this isn't casual reading. If you don't treat this like an academic exercise and think of yourself as back in school, you will fail. You will not pass. You will not pass go and get $200. You'll actually owe money. So please treat your studies as if you're back in school. You spent $100 grand, $200 grand, $300 grand to be called doctor. Don't be cheap with this test. This test turns a degree into a business, a license to practice. It is the most important thing next to marriage, children, buying a home. This license is something you have worked your butt off for. And you've spent, I've heard the story, Scott, I've spent $20,000 on prep programs. Well, that's not true with Prepjet. And I have hardship people that we help. We can't help them all, but we help as many as we're allowed. And we can help you. But you can help yourself. Watch my videos in the video library. There's 85 videos on test taking skills. You can do this. You really can. I've seen people go from 385, 367. I even had someone in the 240s get a 540, 550, 510. What the hell do I care as long as there's a 5 in front of it? You can do this. You can be part of this. All it takes is self-confidence and a structured study schedule. I'll be back next Friday. I want to thank you for watching this. And of course, feel free to visit our website, prepjet.net. Read the About Us, learn about the history of Prepjet, use the trial. The trial, I believe, has been extended. We're working to extend it from 7 days to 14 days, so you have plenty of time to look at everything. If you have any questions about our programs, feel free to write my colleague Ethan, ETHAN, at prepjet.net, and he can assist you. And the last thing I want to say is this. On our website, on the homepage, if you scroll down, you'll see all the free workshops, statistics, exam practice, test-taking strategies, rebuilding self-confidence. They're all free. They're all for you. You're welcome to attend. And I'm not Monty Hall, and I don't care if you don't buy our program or not. It's not going to change my life. I'm fine. I just want you to pass. I believe more than anybody, because I've been doing this longer than anybody else in this business. I licensed my competitors, most of whom are gone. And I can tell you, I think this is the model that's making the difference and why we're seeing an uptick in people passing in the United States and Canada. The Prepjet method focuses only on teaching the test, not psychology. I hope that you have a pleasant weekend, and I want to thank you for tuning in. And again, there are other videos that you can see in YouTube. And of course, there's 85 videos in the Prepjet app, should you decide to sign up with us. I hope you do. Be happy to work with you. And always feel free to write support@prepjet.net to attend any of our free workshops. And if you have any questions about our programs, write Ethan@prepjet.net. This is Scott Abels, and I want to thank you for your time today.